Namaskar, everyone. My name is Abhinav Agarwal, and thank you all for joining in and seeing my tweet on this first Twitter Spaces on the Mahabharata. So this is also my first Twitter Spaces discussion, and I thought what better topic to start off with than the Mahabharata. And within the Mahabharata also, I think one of the most uh, often discussed topics, interesting, controversial, contentious topics for sure is any discussion that has Karna in it. I think the second most contentious topic is probably Yudhishthir, but we will leave that for a separate day. So, uh, we have a bunch of very knowledgeable persons and authors here. So I'll read out a few names that I see, and so there is a Saiswaroopa who needs no introduction. She's the best-selling author of several books based on Itihasa and Puranas, and her latest book that came out is Avishi and Mauri, and before that Rukmani and Draupadi, and she was also the curator of Unsung Valor, and which was a collection of about 10 stories of unknown battles or lesser known battles from the Mahabharata. And in that volume, that was published by Bloomsbury in 2020. From that anthology, we have a couple of we have actually more than a few authors with us. One is Shivakumar, who was one of the authors of Unsung Valor. We have Deepak.
Hello.
Hey, and we have Deepak, who not only is a co-author in this anthology, Unsung Valor, but very recently his first, full-fledged independent book also came out, Abhimanyu, the Warrior Prince, published by Bloomsbury. It's a fantastic book, and I strongly encourage you to go get a copy of it. It's available as a paperback and as a Kindle ebook. We have let's see, we have Ranjit, who is also an author of one of the 10 stories in Unsung Valor, and he's also we expect his full independent book also to come out on the three Ramas, Parshurama, Balrama, and Kodandarama, to come out next year. So really looking forward to that. We have BV also. Again, he's also an author on the of this Unsung Valor series. So we have a huge number of people who are most qualified to talk about the Mahabharata, and Karna is.
I see Pranshu and Amrita also. They were also the part of.
Oh, awesome! So Sai, can you also please make them a speaker?
Yeah. I'll do that.
So we have basically like most of the authors who contributed stories to Unsung Valor, which is the anthology of stories from the Mahabharata and published by, as I said, Bloomsbury here. So let us quickly get into what we want to talk about and what we don't want to talk about. So when we talk about the Mahabharata and Karna, now there are any number of stories that have cropped up over the last 100 years, over the last several hundred years when it comes to Karna. We have a lot of glorification, mythification of Karna that has taken place by by different authors a half a century back, and is currently also happening. So we don't want to get into that just now. What we will instead do is confine ourselves to the authoritative version of the Mahabharata, which is the critical edition. Now, there are regional recensions of the Mahabharata itself. Yes, there is a northern recension, there's a Kumbakonam recension, there is the Grantha recension. So there are many of them, right? So we decided that we will stick with the critical edition that was brought out by the Bhandarkar Oriental Research Institute, and of which there are several English language translations available. The most famous one is the one that was brought out by Sri Vivek, 10 volumes and published by Penguin. And the reason we are doing that is that let us first establish what the Mahabharata itself has to tell us about Karn as well as the different characters in it, right? So once we establish that baseline, then we can obviously go and see that, okay, this is what this account talks about the Karn and where it differs from the Mahabharata and where it sort of exaggerates or distorts or builds upon. That is a topic for a separate discussion. Now, when it comes to Karn himself, the basic facts of his life are fairly well known and not in any kind of he was born to Kunti, or Pritha as she was at that time known, before she was married, and that in itself was the result of the boon that was given by Rishi Durvasa. And as a maiden, as an unmarried maiden, she got tempted into seeing if that boon actually worked or not, and she ended up invoking Suryadev, who then said, I can't fruits on, and therefore Karn was born with the Kavach and Kundal that we all know about. And she had to abandon Karn out of fear, out of shame, out of the fear of stigma. The baby Karn, the infant Karn, was then found by Adhirath and his wife Radha, and he grew up as Radhe. And then when he grew, and that is, from that point, then we hear about Karn is only when the Pandavas and the Kauravas had finished their training under Guru Dronacharya, and the first public exhibition of their skills was organized, and that's when Karn enters the Rang Bhumi, and he challenges Arjun and says that whatever this fellow can do, I can do better. And Duryodhan is obviously elated at finding a warrior which he thinks is Arjun's equal, and he immediately crowns him the king of Ang, and therefore saying that he's now the equal, because if you say a king or a prince can fight against a prince, then here is Karn as the king of Ang. But obviously that duel doesn't take place. We have to wait for almost 15 odd years or longer for that to happen. In the meantime, then what happens? So then we know that at the Dyut, at the gambling ground, Pandavas under the leadership of Yudhishthir, they lose everything, including their kingdom, themselves, and even their wife, Draupadi. And when Draupadi is brought to the Sabha on the orders of the Shasan, Karn says that she should be disrobed, etc., etc. We know that. That much also is undisputed. Then we know that there is one small, battle at Virat at the end of the Pandavas' 13 years of exile, which we know how it ends. Essentially, Arjun ends up as the charioteer, as Brihanalla, right? He ends up defeating the assembled Kuru army, including Karn. And then there is the Udyog Parv that follows, at the end of which war is declared, and then 18 days of battle happen, and Karn enters the battlefield only after Bhishma falls, because he had made a promise that he would not fight alongside with Bhishma. And when he enters, he fights for 6-7 days after that, till on the 17th day he's crowned as the commander of the Kaurav army upon Dronacharya's death. And then we know the famous battle happens with Arjun on the, I think, the 17th day. Sorry, he becomes the commander of the army on the 15th day. On the 17th day, this battle happens, and he then dies because his chariot gets stuck in mud, and he gets down, and then he's shot, by Arjun. An arrow from Arjun severs his head, and that is the end of Karn. And we get to then here in, I think, the Saptak Parv, when the Kuru ladies, they come to the battlefield, Gandhari comes there, Kunti comes there, and when The Pandavas are performing the last rites. Kunti says that you forgot one person who was and then she reveals that the Karna was actually your eldest brother. And then Yudhishthir enters into this whole, round of sorrow that he doesn't want to take the throne. He doesn't want to do this, and that's when the Rajdharma Parv begins. So this is the account of Karn's life. Now, I wanted to invite. I see that Deepak is uh, having some problems connecting. I don't know if he is back online. It had said, but so Sai, let's start with you. You did a fair amount of research. In fact, you even published a book. You went through the entire 18 days of Battle of the Mahabharata. You made a very detailed note of every single instance of every battle that was fought between the two armies, and you tallied who won the battle, or whether it was a stalemate and all. Do you want to share from those 18 days of battle any particular insights that you had on how many times Karn fought, or which yeah.
Yes, thank you, Abhinav. Yes, I am just pulling out the Excel sheet as we speak. Before I can open and talk about the numbers in the Kurukshetra war itself, I would want to bring attention to a couple of misunderstandings that have conveniently taken root in the popular imagination. I hope we have time. So you spoke about the Rangabhumi, right? The convocation ceremony of
Correct.
the Pandava princess and the Kaurava princess, and Karna makes a rather dramatic entry there. So what is very little known about Karna before this Rangabhumi is that he was a legitimate, accepted disciple of Drona's ashram. Because he obviously he's older than the Pandavas and Kauravas. So as the son of Athiratha, he was a disciple of Drona, and Drona had taught him basic archery. Drona as well as Kripacharya, they had taught him basic archery, along with the other princes and other students who would have come from other kingdoms. So his basic archery was acquired at the Drona's ashram itself, which is conveniently portrayed like he was rejected from the ashram because he was a Sutaputra and all. The fact is that Sutaputras need to learn archery and basic military sciences along with the Kshatriya warriors, because in war things can happen which may require the Sarathi to fight. Of course, Kurukshetra had a strict code that Sarathis could not be, harmed much, but it's no brainer to say that anybody who is in the Sarathya, he also has to be trained in the basics of military sciences, because a Sarathi has to know strengths and weaknesses of the one he's driving and advise his Rathi on the strategy, on the short term, long term, everything for the day. So that's one misunderstanding. The second misunderstanding in the Rangabhumi is about his request for a duel being rejected, right? On the
Correct.
basis
Correct.
that he does not have the adhikara to fight with a Kshatriya prince, being the son of a Sarathi. Here, I quote from the critical edition itself. So, Abhinav, please correct me if I go wrong. So, the events are like this. I think the Kauravas and Pandavas, they start exhibiting their skills. There is a collective exhibition of skills, After that, the individual exhibition of skills starts. Yudhishthira excels in throwing the javelin. Then Bhima and Duryodhana have a rather heated up, a very heated up argument.
Correct.
I mean, sorry, duel. And that ends up, even the viewers, the citizens who are viewing that match, they get quite divided, like a football, typical football fan fight. So the had to be stopped in the middle because things were heating up. And then to put out some, put off the tension, they invite Arjuna to exhibit his archery skills uh, on a solo basis. And he totally wows the audience. That is the time when Karna enters and also asks for an opportunity to exhibit his skills so that he can get granted a duel with Arjuna. And even that request is granted and he gets to exhibit his skills. Right? And when he then challenges Arjuna, Arjuna agrees for the duel, as well as Drona agrees for the duel. It is Kripacharya who puts in that objection that Karna may not have that adhikara to fight a duel with Arjuna, being the son of a charioteer, being a Sutaputra, which comes from a genuine concern that a Kshatriya prince may have had a superior training and being the best disciple of Drona. It may be a tad unfair on Karna to, expect him to stand up to a duel against Arjuna. So the concern here was for Karna. It's not protecting Arjuna, right? But somehow then all drama unfolds with, Duryodhana crowning him the king of Anga and all that. And by the time the whole Pattabhisheka ceremony concludes, it is sunset, and they did not used to fight after sunset. And that is the reason why we don't get to see a duel between Karna and Arjuna in the Rangabhumi,
Got it.
right?
Got it.
Uh,
Correct. Correct.
yes,
I would
yes.
hi, it's Pranshu here. So I would also actually argue on the other side also. The Kripacharya basically is the main idea is presenting the princess to the audience, the Hastinapur, the next generation of the Rajanya as such. In a fight, Arjun definitely was the best student. There's no doubt about that. But the point was that Arjun has had no real lifetime of experience. Karn is 20 to 25 years older than Arjun. He has had experience, right? You have see, we always show the same age in Mahabharata serials and everything. Karna's son was older than Nakul. So you see later in the Mahabharata, right? At least in the northern edition, when Vrishsen is fighting Nakul, right? It is shown Vrishsen is older than Nakul in that battle, where Nakul then goes with his sword and starts killing all the warriors around Vrishsen.
That's
In that
interesting.
sequence, it is shown that the Nakul is more agile, more youthful than Vrishsen. So here, you're basically poet is hinting at the point that, and Kripacharya is also hitting at the point an experienced warrior, even if he is not a perfect warrior, will have an advantage in a Pradarshani setting over a prince. So it could be either way, right? You can argue both ways, but most likely if he was fitting to the paradigm of the Pradarshani, Arjun would have won, or maybe not. And others like have made situations on that his hearing off and everything in that Mrityunjay, right? He says that
Yes.
Karna's hearing was off or something like that. So that is like later on additions, but the main idea was it's on the both sides that you are basically presenting the princess to the audience, and this is not a where the ruling class is fighting each other. Like they already a scene that Bhim and Duryodhana fought each other, right? The common public needs to be assured that, the ruling class is united. And that's where Kripa comes in. I mean, Kripacharya comes in. He is,
Okay.
you see, you have to look from the point of view of Kripacharya also. He is the foundling, raised by the same class. He is dedicated to the Hastinapur state. So his decisions might be more Hastinapur specific, the administration specific, than any caste or any other such even impartiality or partiality either of the guys chaps in place.
Sure. It's beautiful the way Vyasa is so open for interpretation, because when I was reading the critical edition, I felt like, because there was a need to balance the crowd emotions there. They had already come to blows around Bhima and Duryodhana's duel, and they did not want further unrest with with this drama
Exactly,
between
exactly,
Karna and
exactly.
hmm.
Because for last 15, 20 years, since Yudhishthir would have come back, right? Well, since the time when Yudhishthir came back and they were under the training under Drone, people were already have been like speculating for last decade or so. When is Yudhishthir going to take over? There will be a split, right, between the patronage of the current administration, Dhritarashtra's people, and the people expecting, the old Pandu followers and everything. So there will always be a schism. And Kripacharya being in a very important position, Kripacharya literally is the heir to the throne, if you think about it, right? If his father had not adopted him, recognized him, Kripacharya would have inherited the throne. So Kripacharya is dedicated to the administration that way.
Okay, okay. Thank you so much, Pranshu. So, Abhinav, I'm having a bit of a trouble opening the sheet right now, so someone else can speak for the next 5 minutes before I.
Sure, sure. Yeah, thanks, Sai. Thanks, Pranshu. That is fascinating, right? And actually, come to think of it, Karn was born when Kunti was very young. And then years passed by, then she gets married to Pandu. Then years passed by, Pandu is busy conquering the earth, and then he goes to the forest, and then he has that, accidental killing of Rishi Kindam. And that is when, after more time passes, that he realizes, has this realization that he has to have progeny, and he cannot do that because of the curse. And that is when the first of Pandu's sons are born, Yudhishthir, right? So many years would have obviously passed. And also remember that in those times, warriors or people used to have children get married at a young age. Abhimanyu, when he died, he was already through Uttara expecting their first child, right? And he was barely, 16, 17 years old. So that's a very,
Oh,
very,
that's a later. I think that's 16 years later, because Abhimanyu, before at the time of Rajasuya Yagya, he actually escorts the people like the kings and sees them in places, right? So
ah,
and the war took 14 years later. So Abhimanyu was in 30s, maybe still not like very young, but young like 60-year-olds like Arjun and others. Yeah, you see, this is there's another paradigm, right? We already know that he already had a first wife, like in local recessions, like southern recession, Vatsala marriage and all those. So was already like 10 years in the past. So the youngest person actually named in Mahabharata, as per the northern edition, is Dhishketu's son. He's the grandson of Shishupal, and he's 16 years of age. So he is specifically named as a 16-year-old. So maybe later on, poets, latched onto that
oh,
to show that
fascinating.
Abhimanyu is similar age.
Great. Excellent. We are already learning, so many new things. So now we have talked about this, this first entrance of Karn, and then the next we really hear about Karn is in the Dyut Parv, or when when the Pandavas are invited to Hastinapur and the game of dice takes place. Now, there I'll read out a few sections from the Mahabharata itself. So, what happens? So here is Yudhishthir who has lost everything, right? And Dushasan has basically dragged Draupadi into the sabha, into the court, uh, and then Vikarn speaks up and he says that he's actually the only Kuru who speaks up in that entire sabha, other than Vidur, that I do not think she has been won. Now, when he says this, who is the person to respond? Not Duryodhan, not Dushasan, and it is Karn. And the critical edition says, almost senseless with anger, Karn berated Vikarn and argued that Draupadi had indeed been won by fair means. He does not end there. He not only says that Vikarn, you're but a child and all, and here is what he says, and I quote: "It has been ordained by the gods that a woman should only have one husband. However, she submits to many, and it is therefore certain that she is a courtesan. It is my view that there is nothing surprising in her being brought into the sabha in a single garment, or even if she is naked. In accordance with dharma, Sobal has won all the riches the Pandavas possessed, including her and themselves, O Dushasan. This Vikarn is only a child, though he speaks words of wisdom. Strip away the garments from the Pandavas and Draupadi." Not Karn's fight. This was between the Kauravas and the Pandavas. Whatever possessed Karn to speak, and that to speak so harshly and such, I mean, words one would not expect a person who's noble and who's a hero to speak this way. Uh, Shivu, do you want to comment on this? And this is I'm calling you Shivu, but he's Shivakumar G, and he's one of the authors of the Unsung Valor anthology. So Shivu, if you can unmute yours. Yes, okay.
Yeah, thanks, Abhinav. Abhinav, I want to take a completely different view, not a different view, rather, I read Mahabharata in a very metaphoric way. So, the story of Karna has a certain significance, unique significance in Mahabharata. Fundamentally, Mahabharata is about the exploration of Purushartha in all possible ways, of course, anchored on Dharma. So, in Karna's case, Karna, every single metaphor that Vyasa has carved has unique significance. And the birth of Karna, no, very few people's stories in Mahabharata has that kind of a carved out story on birth. Arjuna is one exception, and of course, Bhima and Karna are important exceptions. But wherever there is a birth related story, it is signifying something important, including Draupadi. In Karna's case, two things are extremely important at birth. One, divinity came to Kunti, but Kunti could not contain it. She invoked the divinity ahead of time. So that is one important metaphor, that if you create, it's a creation, getting birth of a child is a creative process. So creation, for that there is a certain preparation, certain tapas, and certain containing capacity that is necessary. If that is not going to happen, even if divinity comes, you will not only not be able to contain it, you will also let it go. It will result in a drift that you cannot manage. And the drift is signified by Karna being put inside a basket and let on the river. I always wonder, why did Vyasa choose the metaphor floating the baby on a river? It's there in some recensions, it's not there in some other recensions. That is a different matter. But that's a larger story. So Karna floats. So he begins to float before even getting his legs. So he floats forever. His life becomes an eternal float.
Perfect. Yeah.
And that float is that drifting without being rooted at a single place. It's continuous process. He gets one of the most loving parents in the form of Adhiratha and Radha, but he simply cannot contain himself.
Hello. Did we lose Shivu?
Yeah, I'm afraid so. Shiv, we can't hear you. That's bad
Uh,
because his
that
his
was
exposition was beautiful.
that was brilliant. I mean, just look at the metaphor that Karan basically floats even before he has found his feet. He's set adrift. He's floating. And the river, if you see, look at it as a metaphor for life itself. He has been set on the path of life even before. He has all the faculties with him to make the correct decisions. It's fascinating.
Yeah,
Uh,
and you see, even in the war, right? On the 14th day, the crucial day, Bhim and Karn has all these battles. Bhim defeats him several times. I think it's an X number of times. It's a very important number also that. But Bhim is always compared as an avatar of Shiva, and Shiva controls that thought, right? Shiva is holding the deer, the chanchal, the the chanchal man, basically running away, and he holds that, and that's what Vyas even pictures, and that's what Shiva was trying to say, that Karna was that chanchal man, always running away from the control of the mind itself, the Indra. And that's again the point again is that he fights Indra's son, basically Indra being the brain here. So the metaphorically also this makes perfect sense, like how she was describing Vishy comes back in. I don't want to take, but
yes, I think we had Shivu back. I don't see
Mhm.
him again. So, but to continue on Shivu's point, right? So I'll take a couple of minutes to talk to you again through a few more incidents of Karna's life, and then them with Arjun. So, I talked about how in the game of dice, even though it was in a manner of speaking, Karn had no dog in that fight, and yet he's the person who utters the most hurtful of words. Many years later, when Krishna goes to meet Karn, he does express regret for those words, but this is like coming what 13 and a half years too late. It is neither here nor there at that point. His apology. But go to the start of the war itself. What does when in the Rath Atirath Sankhya Parv, when Bhishma is assessing all the warriors in the in that battle, what does he say? He says that Karn is boastful, he's inferior, he's insolent, he's not a full Rathi. In fact, he's only half a Rathi. And Dron concurs with Bhim's assessment. Now we know why, or we can guess as to why Bhishma said those words, and they had the intended effect. Karn again, flares up and he says, "I will never fight as long as Gange is alive. But once Bhishma has been slain, I will fight with all the Maharats." And he sits out of that war that he had been hoping for, preparing for his entire life. He sits out of more than half that war. For 9 days, he's out of that war. Why did he do that? He had no, I mean, then go to what, the 14th day, 15th day, right? After Drona has fallen. Now, in that perv, even before they have entered the battlefield, there is an altercation between Shalle and Karn. And it goes on hundreds of shlokas. So literally tens of pages. There's back and forth. They are abusing each other. They are, they're calling each other's names. And Karn is saying that if you say one more thing, I'll cut off your head. And Shalle is saying that you're not even fit to be on the same battlefield as Karn. Look at the state of mind that Karn had when he enters the battlefield, right? And finally, how does he meet his end? The earth swallows up one of the wheels of his chariot. His charioteer Shalle refuses to get down from the chariot. Karn himself has to get down, and that's when he meets his end. Look at the imagery, right? We all have this image in mind of top the Rath with Krishna as his charioteer, as a Sarthi. The contrast between Krishna and Arjuna on the one hand cannot be greater than Karn and Shalle on the other hand. And to my mind, the imagery that comes in mind is from the Kathopanishad, right? When Yam tells Nachiket that the self, the self is the lord of the chariot, and the body is the chariot itself, and the mind or the intellect is the charioteer, and the mind are the reins, the senses, the horses, and desires are the road they travel. And this is expressed so beautifully through the Arjun Rath with Krishna as the charioteer. On the other hand, look at the imagery that comes to mind when you see that, right? The so distracted, confused, and out of sync is that are the two people there, Shalle and Karn, that I think the metaphorical is even starker than the literal. And finally, it struck me when I was reading the critical edition that Bhishma was assessing Karn's capabilities. Before rating Karn as half a Rathi, Drone had said this about Karn, to Karn himself, that Karn is generous, but he's also distracted. And if you look at all the key episodes of Karn's life, it was distraction that drove his decisions rather than a focus. So with that, Shivu, if you can, yes, you are back. If you can
Yeah,
resume,
I'm back. Yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
I think you made the right point. Even there, it is his inability to, contain the. Uh, he- he's got one of the best charioteers in the universe, but he does not have the capacity to contain. And this drift in him is a very continuous process. From Athiratha, he goes to. He's not very happy being in the family of Athiratha. So his ambition takes him to the Kshatriyas. But he does not become a full Kshatriya in the sense that the kind of training that a typical Kshatriya goes through, that rigor, he does not have. And yet his ambition is to become one. Similarly, he accepts the position of a king without actually having to fight for it. He gets it in Dan, which a true Kshatriya will never ever do. So what is depicted by Vyasa is continuously the drift that begins at the time of birth and the displacement that affects in him, that becomes an eternal drift. Neither does he become a good Suta, nor does he become a good Kshatriya. And he is not able to anchor himself in one Swadharma. This Swadharma conflict even happens with Parashurama when he goes there. He ends up, the fact that he kills a cow is a metaphor over there. because he has acquired a vidya. He does not have the ability to recognize a cow from a distance. That is the metaphor over there. So he has acquired an ability without being able to manage all risks that come with that ability. Again, it leads to a Swadharma conflict. So Karna's life is depicted by Vyasa as the tragedy that results from inviting divinity ahead of time without having the capacity, and the resulting displacement and drift. Displacement results in an eternal drift of Swadharma, and this is in contrast with how Arjuna is born completely anchored, completely knowing his Swadharma, so on and so forth. So this is where Karna's character. This is actually the metaphor of how Karna's character has been carved in Mahabharata. Of course, everything else is a detail, but one important detail we should not forget, with respect to the final story that you mentioned. For all that is, said about Karna being, unfortunate and discriminated and so on and so forth, the abuse that he heaps on Shalya is extremely discriminatory, extremely, whatever you want to call patriarchal, so on and so forth. In the modern world, everything that is considered negative in the context of modernity, every single thing Karna indulges in his abuse of Shalya.
So, Shivu,
Anybody who reads that discussion between Shalya and Karna cannot have any misunderstanding as to where to place Karna in the larger scheme of Dharma.
so Shivu,
That is my limited point.
this is very pertinent that you brought this up. What the abuse that Karn heaps on Shalya, and Shalya is in fact Karna's relative, right? He was after all, what do you call, Madri's brother. So he was related, but he
Yeah.
doesn't know that, of course. But these are some
Yeah.
of the words he uses to abuse Shalya, who was, by the way,
Yeah. By then he knows Abhinav. By then he knows
oh, sorry,
because
yes, of course he knows. Yes, what am I saying? He knows. Krishna himself has come to, I mean, God himself, Narayan himself comes to Karna, and he turns down, he spurns Narayan. But these are the words that he uses. He tells Shalya, who's, by the way, himself a king, that you are evil in nature, you are stupid, there are no good feelings in a Madrak. He, a Madrak, always lies and is never straight. Noble women of the Madraks, according to their own wishes, mingle with men, known and unknown. They drink liquor, eat the flesh of cows, and dance and laugh. Women who are intoxicated by liquor cast off their clothes and dance around naked. Oh, Madrak, you are the son of one such. I mean, this is like, I would say, Sadak Chhap language that he's using.
Actually, if you look at the Indonesian version of Mahabharata, it's even more stark because they are actually son-in-law and father-in-law. So Karn is actually married to a daughter of Shalya. So when he abuses, so in the Indonesian context, Karn is never seen as a good guy like we have manufactured him in our milieu. So in Indonesian, it is even more clear because Shalya is actually a respected, actually one of the big variations of Mahabharata in Indonesia is actually a wife of Shalya listening to the description of the battle from one of the maids who is basically touring every day. So it's like like Sanjay to Dhritarashtra. The other version they have is basically to Shalya's wife. So Shalya is very important that way and very clearly indicated as a father-in-law. So when Karn abuses him, it's even more further. He's abusing his own father. So this is another context basically, which comes again. You said sadak chhap. He doesn't have a control over his tongue. He doesn't have control over his thoughts. He says everything. He probably doesn't mean it. He probably will regret it if he gets a chance of it. But that's what it always comes back as somebody who doesn't have the focus or control.
Amazing. Deepak, if you are able to, if you've got your audio back, do you want to talk? You are not only along with Pranshu and Shivu, a co-author of one of the stories, and you wrote one of the stories in Unsung Valor, and now your book Abhimanyu has also come out. You've obviously, you're very, very knowledgeable about the Mahabharata. Do you want to tell us something about Karn the warrior?
Yeah, good evening, everybody. I hope I'm audible.
Yes, you are.
Yeah, there were some glitches, so most of the audio was not audible for me before this. So anyway, like you said, Karna the warrior, where does he stand? Because when we make a list of the top warriors of the Mahabharata war, generally people put Karna and Arjuna at the top. Now, there are fan wars on social media about, is Karna great, is Arjuna great? So how do we decide how was Karna as a warrior? Where does he stand? So for this, the best way to do it is to see what he has actually achieved in battles. So I've done a small analysis. So I would like to divide it into two parts. One is pre-war and the other is war. So what all did he do before the war? So I'm only looking at the conflicts and battles here. So the first time we see Karna in action is during the Draupadi Swayamvara. When Arjuna wins, then the kings get agitated and they decide to attack. And that's when Arjuna and Bhima jump in to defend Drupada. And then as we know, there is a battle between Karna and Arjuna, and Karna just cannot face up to Arjuna. So then he asks him, "Are you Vishnu? How can you fight like this?" So he says, "I'm just a mere Brahmana." So then Karna withdraws from the battle. So that is the first time we see him in action. Then the second time we see him is during the Ghosha Yatra. That is when Duryodhana picks up a fight with the Gandharvas. So here again, Karna puts up a brave fight, but then finally he is not able to face the Gandharvas, and he gets into Vikarna's chariot and flees from there. So that is the second incident we see. Now the third incident before the war was during the Virata war. So that was when the entire Kaurava army takes on Arjuna, who is as Bruhannala. So there is an interesting thing here, wherein Karna initially boasts. He says that I am going to bring down the Kapidvaja and then I'm going to destroy Arjuna and so many things. And then of course Kripa counters him and taunts him, and then there is a fight and all that. And finally when the battle starts, again Karna is not able to match up to Arjuna. So he actually loses consciousness, he faints, and again he has to flee from the battle. Then he comes back again, and there is a combined attack, and we know that Arjuna uses the Sammohana Astra, and all of them are rendered unconscious. So that is the third incident before the war. So like we see in all these three incidents, not come out in good colors. Now there are
So Deepak, of the three that you have outlined, in the first one there is no real battle as such. In the second one, he loses, he runs away. In the third one, he loses, and he falls to Arjuna's Sammohana Astra. And I believe Arjun says that the only person I know that may only be pretending is Bhishma.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, excellent. Please carry
just two more things. These are the direct narrations that we see in the Mahabharata. Now there is a reference in the Shanti Parva wherein Narada talks about Karna's life to Yudhishthira. So that is when Yudhishthira is totally dejected after learning that Karna was his brother. So Narada tells him his story, and that's when he talks about the Swayamvara of Bhanumati. Of course, the Mahabharata does not mention Bhanumati by name. So that is
Oh,
when Karna
yes.
is believed to have defeated all, and then there is a Malla Yuddha with Jarasandha, and he defeats him. So that is the one place where we get to see him in action, but
But
it's not a
but
direct
Deepak,
narration.
correct. But Deepak, if I remember again, in that he forcibly carries off the that princess, right?
Yes, yes. Bhanumati is forcibly carried off, and they all try to stop him. They try to stop Duryodhana, and then Karna comes to his friend's help and fights with them. So that is the fourth narration we have of Karna's valor. And the last one is the Tikvijaya Yatra of Karna. That is when Duryodhana wants to perform the Ashwamedha, but then he's told that you can't do that. Instead, you do the Vaishnava Yagna. And Karna is believed to have gone on a Tikvijaya Yatra to conquer the world. But the problem here, a critical edition of the Mahabharata does not have. It is there in other editions, but the critical edition does not have this reference. So there are just some references that he defeated the Kiratas, then he defeated the Kambojas, and there is a mention of him defeating a king called Nagnajit. So there is no clear reference that whether he defeated great kings like Shalya and Bhagadatta in the uh, Digvijay. So that is as far as the critical edition goes. So these are the 5 incidents that I could find before the war, wherein
There were,
Karna participated.
yeah, Deepak, there were 2 more,
Yeah,
right? The Dakshina war, right? When they go to get Guru Dakshina for Drona. Did Karna
yeah.
participate on the far side?
But that again, according to critical edition, it's not clear
Okay.
whether Karna was
And
there or not.
and then in the Rasu Yagya, Bhim defeats him to get the tribute for Yudhishthir.
But that again, I couldn't find it in critical edition. That's why I
Oh, it's
just
not
left
in,
it.
okay. Okay.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, sorry.
So I went with
There's
critical
so many
edition.
editions out there. I
Yeah,
read them also. So,
yeah.
I
So
can't
since
remember
there
if
are so
this
many
one has it or
editions,
not. Yeah.
I prefer to stick to Bori critical
Critical,
edition
yeah.
for this particular analysis. But of course, like you said, probably there is another edition wherein it says that Bhima went to Anga and defeated Karna.
There's actually beginning of the Drone Parv also. Karn is talking about his like the Duryodhana also talks about some of his like conquests, right? Before
Yeah, yeah,
nominating,
correct.
uh, and that also is very very vague. Like the names are very vague, and again it's
Yes, yes,
Pulindas, Kiratas,
yes,
and
yes,
sidereal tribes, you could say, or
yeah,
kingdoms.
yeah. That's right.
So here I'll take a pause and for people who joined in late or that the critical edition is the one that we are referring to the most because it is again, as I said, it is a result of almost 40 years of research by scholars of the Bhandarkar Oriental Research Institute, and it is also the one that is today generally accepted to be an authoritative edition. Obviously, this doesn't diminish the value and the place that recensions have. But for our purposes, as I said, we need to set a baseline, and that's what we are using. So here, yeah, please carry on, Deepak.
Yeah. So this is the pre-war incidents featuring Karna. Now, when we turn to the war itself, so as we know, the first 10 days he was not there in the war. So he makes an entry on day 11, and there's nothing much significant which happens. There's nothing much significant that he does. Of course, he would have killed many soldiers and all that. But there's nothing of significance on day 11. Now, in day 12, he has a battle with Arjuna, and Arjuna kills 2 of his brothers. So here again, he is not able to defend his brothers. Then day 13, the day of the Chakravuha. So that is where Abhimanyu defeats him multiple times, 3 times, and one
Three
of the
times.
times he hits him. Yeah, one of the times he hits him on his ear. He injures him on his ear, and all the 3 times Karna is forced to flee. Then, of course, we know that uh, Abhimanyu was killed by deceit and the subsequent events. Then, when we look at day 14, Karna was one among the great warriors who was assigned by Duryodhana to protect Jayadratha. So, but as we know, he failed. So, what is significant on day 14 is his repeated battles with Bhima. So, there were so many battles he fought, and except on one occasion, on every occasion he was soundly thrashed and had to flee. And every time, multiple times, Duryodhana sent in his brothers one after the other to defend defend Karna from Bhima. By the end of the day, 31 brothers of Duryodhana were killed by Bhima just while defending Karna. So that was the extent of the battle. And only once what happens, Bhima's chariot and weapons are destroyed. That's when he taps him with his bow on his shoulder, and then he abuses him. He says, "You're a glutton,"
Yeah.
and so many other things.
Yeah, here if I can add some detail, Deepak,
Yeah,
this is there's one small detail where that happens before Bhima finally loses to Karna.
yeah,
That
yeah,
is one of the brothers killed before that. One of the brothers of Duryodhana killed before he finally submits to Karna is Vikarna.
yes,
Right? And Vikarna was the one who supported Draupadi. And in
correct.
one of the regional editions, I think it's one of the southern or Kumbakonam, because I couldn't find this in the critical edition, where Bhima actually cries,
Yes, correct.
weeps for having killed Vikarna, saying, "Ki
Yes,
yours was the only voice where you spoke up for Draupadi, where I could not speak up, and I am having to kill it.
yes,
Curse the, what, it's a Kshatriya."
yeah. That I remember reading that.
Yes. So that is the lament of Bhima upon killing Vikarna. And so I think there is a level of distraction that happens, when he next faces Karna.
Yes, that
That's
is
something which
so
is,
probably
yeah.
that's where he lost a bit of balance.
Yes. Yeah,
Then,
please go on.
yeah, then the battle continues on the night after Jayadratha is killed. So that is where he defeats Sahadeva. So that is +1 to Karna. And then, of course, there is a epic battle with Ghatotkacha. So wherein none of them are able to face him, and Karna alone faces Ghatotkacha. But then he is not able to kill Ghatotkacha, and everyone forces him to use the Vasavi Shakti which he had reserved for Arjuna. So, so with that, he loses the Vasavi Shakti, the only hope he had of killing Arjuna. So on day 15, again there is nothing much of significance. He defends Duryodhana many times during the battle by taking on the Pandavas. Then day 16 is when he defeats Nakula. So as we know, he had given a promise to Kunti that he will spare all the sons except Arjuna. So he does not kill Nakula. And then at the end of the day, there is a fierce duel with Arjuna. So there is no clear winner. The sun sets and the day's battle gets over. Then we move to the last day of Karna's life. So as it was mentioned above, there is a fierce discussion with Shalya. So wherein they exchange words and all that. Then finally, the battle starts, and there is a major defeat of Yudhishthira. Yudhishthira is injured and has to leave the battle, and that's when he deploys the Bhargavastra. And Krishna tells Arjuna that they should go and see what has happened to you. So that is the only instance where Arjuna does not take on Karna. But there are many who claim that Arjuna ran away from the Bhargavastra. But the Bhargavastra, from what I could understand, was not targeted at Arjuna. It was fired at the entire army. So we cannot take it as a victory for Karna in this instance. Then he kills Vrishasena, Karna's son, in front of him. Arjuna had taken an oath before. He had said that you insulted my brother and called him a glutton. So I'm going to kill your son in front of you. So he does that. And then, of course, as we know, there's the grand finale wherein Arjuna beheads Karna using the Anjali Kastra. So even in that battle, so we can see that there was only one instance when he uses the
Did we lose Deepak?
Yeah, the one thing which I think Deepak was trying to emphasize was that Arjun never wanted to use Divyastra on ordinary soldiers or warriors. From the very beginning of the war, he basically advised Yudhishthira that we can win the war in like few seconds. He says to Yudhishthira, you are Yamaraj, right? You just have to look at angry. You have to just look angry, and the enemy will be destroyed. But we will fight it as humans. And he basically emphasized that point. Nara, like, he's Nara, representing literally all humanity. Nara, and we will fight it as a Purusharth of Nara. And that's basically what Arjun was always about. And he very rarely uses the divine anywhere until like almost necessary. So like that's what I think Deepak was trying to say. The Anjalika Astra on the second day, I think he used when he was surrounded on all sides by all the Kaurava warriors. He used another one as Mahindrastra. On second, on fourth day, I don't remember exactly. On second night, I think he uses one astra, and on the fourth day he uses one astra. So Arjun hardly used that, and that's basically where he again emphasized that we fight as a team. And as you said, this is about Karna, and I think Karna was discriminated against. See, and I'll go it from another point of view. Arjun, wherever he would actually, so even there's a K.M. Munshi, founder of Bharati Vidya Bhavan. He had written a very nice series of books, Krishna Avatar. And here also he has created a very nice character sketch of Arjuna, where likes of Bhim and Yudhishthir act as you know think of an electric circuit. So Arjun is the uncontrolled electricity, but they act as resistors, like they're capacitors, literally. But Bhim and Yudhishthir act as his uh, controllers, you could say. Even Arjuna, Krishna later is literally the brain on that chariot, or the body rupee chariot, right? And acting as the brain control Arjun's uncontrollable urges, you could say. And so that's why Arjun was always in control. Karn unfortunately never got that as a part of it. He was part of a structure where he was with Duryodhan, who was many years younger to him. He was with Dushasan, who doesn't think anywhere in the whole epic, and he was with Shakuni. And Shakuni himself is not a very good, mentor to have. So that's where you can say Karn had no good. I mean, he had Kripacharya and Drona, but like he maybe, I don't know, despised them or did look down on them or thought of them as a part of the structure. Like Dronacharya was, Jamai, Jijaji of the royal family, right? Married to Kripi. Kripacharya was part of that. So, Karn never had this capacitor. And that's where I bring the power of the local editions. In the Indonesian edition, he has an older brother. Adhirath has an older son called Chitrasen. And again, Karn never listens to him. He has his uncle. So there's an adopted brother of Kunti. His name is Arya Mangal. And Arya Adi Mangal, he basically takes Karna and finds him a king, Adhirath, to adopt. And he stays with him his whole life. But again, the power is that he looks upon him as like a dai, like a servant, and does not look upon him as his uncle or as his elder. So this is where the the problem of Karna was that he never had that guidance, or he never recognized that guidance when it was given to him. Whereas Arjun always had all these structures around him. Arjun, even Draupadi bossed Arjun. So, so even probably Subhadra bossed him. So Arjun basically was under control, and he was able to get to his full potential. Whereas Karna never had that opportunity.
Yeah, opportunities, seizing upon opportunities, and then I think just the whole issue of Swadharma that Shivu was talking about. And Deepak, you very nicely, summarized some of the key battles that Karna was involved in and how they turned out even before the Kurukshetra war. So we have come up to the 1 hour mark, and I do want to continue this, but perhaps in a couple of days, because there are, I think, many topics that we have not covered, because we have basically been talking the last one, talking about the character of Karn and episodes from his life as have been written down in the Mahabharata, the Vyasa Mahabharata itself, right? We have not even begun to look at how the deification, the mythification of Karn happened, and I for one would be very interested. I'm fascinated to hear people's views on why that turned out. Why do people so vigorously, furiously defend all these so-called myths around Karna? Because they are simply unsubstantiated by any authoritative texts on the Mahabharata. I don't know if we have time. Let's take a couple of questions. So people, I mean, listeners are muted, but if you have a question, can you please request to be made a speaker, and we'll take questions for maybe 5 minutes or so. So, Piyush, I am making you. I've made you a speaker. So, if you are there, can you go ahead and ask your question? Okay. Anyone else want to, Wayne, ask a question to, and we have, wow, this is a huge number of authors we have. So we have S. Anuradha, who has written one of the most moving accounts I've read in recent times. Her book, The Friendless God. We have Manjula, who has written a book on what do you call called Devyani, that has been published by Garuda Books. Again, one of the very famous characters from the Mahabharata. And I say that's okay. I see Arun has a question. So Arun, I've made you a speaker. And guys, if you're not already aware, Arun Krishnan's first book has just released. It is available to order from the Garuda website. It is called. It is the first in a trilogy. And Arun, if you can, you are a speaker now. Do you want to tell us maybe a little bit about your book, and then your what you wanted to ask?
Sorry, Abhinav, I just lost you for a minute. Is that question for me? Can I ask?
Yes, please go ahead. And please also tell us about your first book.
Oh, okay. All right. So very briefly, hi folks. My name is Arun. Just published my first book, which is a historical fiction set during the 7th century of the Common Era. It happens basically. It's the first in the Battle of Vatapi trilogy. So basically, the protagonists are the Pallavas on one side and Pulikeshi and the Chalukyas on the other. And that time it was a time of great ferment in Indian history. So you had Harshavardhana in the north of the Narmada River. You had Pulikeshi just south of it. Then you had the Pallava king Narasimhavarman, the one who built Mahabalipuram. You had the Pandya kings, and then you had the Sri Lankans as well. And I'm not sure how many know, but there was always a lot of Sri Lankan interference in South Indian politics, uh, and South Indian or Tamil interference in Sri Lankan politics over the years, over the centuries. So there's a lot going on. Uh, there were a lot of Buddhism was in the ascendant. There was a Bhakti movement that had started. So it was a time of great flux and change, and that's what the trilogy is about. It's ultimately about Narasimhavarman and how he goes after what I consider a promise that he made to his father in order to avenge his defeat at the hands of Pulikeshi. So this is the first in that series. Okay. So my question I guess is in a sense part of a comment, and that is, Abhinav, you asked why is it that you struggle to understand why people kind of go all out to defy Karna or even kind of support him. And I think it's because he is possibly one of the most flawed characters in a sense. He's one of the most. See, you have Duryodhana and all who painted as uniformly bad, and then you have the Pandavas who are uniformly good for the most part. Karna has this duality in him that he's got some positives. He's supposed to be, Dan Veera Karna, and he's supposed to, be very helping, of a helpful nature. At the same time, you have all these kinks in his armor, right? He doesn't speak up for Draupadi. In fact, he instigates Duryodhana against him, and so on and so forth. So I think people tend to identify a lot more with flawed characters. That's my reading of it, but I'd love to hear from folks like Sai and Shivu and others who are way better informed than I am about it.
Yeah, it is. I mean, and I think also we tend to develop a lot of sympathy for Karan because he is, in our eyes, one of the Pandavas, right? He is the eldest Panda for all practical purposes. But there is
Abhinav, I
so
have one point to make. Actually, this sympathy towards Kurd is there in the tradition in the last 1,000 years, but that is not because he was discriminated. Rather, it is because of the displacement he suffers, at least at the level of what happens between Surya, Durvasa, Kunti, Surya. Karna was not responsible except the fact that his prarabdha karma led him into that situation. So it is that is the point where there is sympathy, and that is what carries through in some of the traditional texts too. Like in Kannada, we have you know the Karnata Bharata Katha Manjari or the Gadugina Bharata by Kumaravyasa, which is little sympathetic of Karna. And even before that, there are Jain works where there is a comparison between the situation of Arjuna and Karna, and there is sympathy for Karna. But none of that is from a standpoint that he was discriminated. It is only from the standpoint of the fact that he suffered a floating displacement early in his life.
yeah, I agree. So let's do one thing, folks. So we'll take maybe one more question, and then I promise in today's Tuesday. So I'll check with with all our speakers and in the next couple of days, I'll try and host this second installment of this discussion. But Jamir has a question, and so Jamir, if you can go ahead and ask your question. If you're unmute, you should be unmuted now. Okay. Madhavendra Singh, I've made you a speaker. Can you go ahead and ask your question, please? Nope. Okay. It's an hour and 10 minutes. So thank you so much for joining in. And thank you all, Sai and Shivu and Deepak and Pranshu. And, this has been very, very insightful. I learned a lot of things about the Mahabharata, and I hope others did too. We are going to continue our discussion on Karna in a couple of days. So watch out for the tweet and all. This is being recorded, so this should be available for you to listen again. And thank you in the meantime, and we'll talk again in a few days. Bye.
Namaste.